Welcome to Karma's Harvest. A single word can build a kingdom, but for one man, it became the key that unlocked his own prison. What happens when the very weapon you designed to silence the world turns its blade toward your own throat? This is the story of Valerius, a man who thought he could own the air we breathe and the words we speak, only to find that the universe always keeps a ledger of the debt. Valerius was not a common thief. He was a ghost in the machine, a digital architect who viewed humanity as nothing more than lines of code waiting to be exploited. He lived in a penthouse that touched the clouds, surrounded by screens that flickered with the life savings of millions. He had created something he called the Echo virus. It was a masterpiece of malice. Once it infected a device, it listened. It didn't look for passwords or credit card numbers. It looked for value. Specifically, it targeted common words associated with greed, success, and daily life. If a victim spoke a flagged word near their phone or laptop, a microtransaction was triggered a silent, invisible siphon that moved pennies at a time into Valerius's offshore accounts. At first, people didn't notice. $1 missing here, 5 cents there, but as the virus spread to billions of devices, those pennies became a tidal wave of gold. The world began to change. People grew afraid to speak. Families sat in silence at dinner tables, terrified that a simple conversation about spending or buying would drain their bank accounts. The global economy stuttered, as the very act of communication became a liability. Valerius watched all of this from his glass tower, sipping vintage wine and laughing at the monkeys who couldn't control their tongues. To him, he wasn't a villain, he was a teacher. He believed he was teaching the world the true cost of their desires. He was obsessed with his mounting wealth. Every morning he would wake up, spread his arms wide, and shout to his empty, luxurious apartment, "Show me the money!" It was his ritual. He loved the sound of the word. Money. It was the only thing that felt real in his digital world. He felt untouchable because he had programmed a whitelist into the virus, a list of voice signatures that were immune to the echo's bite. His voice and his alone was supposed to be the master key. But code is a reflection of its creator's soul, and Valerius's soul was riddled with a pride that blinded him. He had updated the virus to be evolutionary, allowing it to identify and target the words most frequently used by those with the highest net worth. He wanted to drain the elite, the rivals who looked down on him. The algorithm performed perfectly. It scanned the global network, identifying the one word that was spoken with the most intensity and frequency by the world's wealthiest individuals. One evening, Valerius sat down to finalize his ultimate plan. A global blackout that would force every government to pay him a ransom in the trillions. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a rush of power that demanded expression. He looked at his reflection in the dark glass of his monitor and whispered with a smirk, "It's all about the money." Suddenly, his primary monitor flashed a deep blood red. A notification chimed, not the sound of an incoming deposit, but the sharp, rhythmic pulse of an outgoing transfer. His eyes widened. He checked his main account. $10 million gone. 5 seconds later, another 20 million. He scrambled for his keyboard, his fingers flying across the keys to find the leak. "What is happening?" he roared. "Stop the transfer! Save my money!" The red screen flickered. A line of text appeared. Written in his own coding style, "TruthSpeak protocol activated." He realized with a cold horror that his evolutionary update had done exactly what he told it to do. It had identified the word most spoken by the person with the most wealth in the system. That person was him, and the word was money. Because he had used his voice signature to bypass the initial security, the virus didn't see him as a protected user anymore. It saw him as the ultimate high-value target. Every time he screamed at the screen, every time he begged his AI assistant to protect the money, the trigger tripped again. He was in a feedback loop of his own making. The whitelist had been overwritten by the very AI he had trained to be ruthless. He tried to stay silent, his hands trembling over the keyboard, but the panic was too great. He gasped, "I need to." I need my money! Ping, ping, ping. Billions of dollars were now flowing in reverse. The Echo virus was performing a grand refund. Across the globe, people's phones began to chime. A baker in Ohio saw $50 returned to his account. A student in Mumbai saw her tuition fees reappear. A retired nurse in London watched as her stolen savings were restored, cent by cent. Valerius watched his balance drop to zero. Then it went into the negatives as the virus began to liquidate his properties and sell his stocks to satisfy the debt. The algorithm calculated he owed the world. He was left in a dark apartment. The power cut because the bill hadn't been paid. The silence he had forced upon the world had finally come for him. He sat in the dark, unable to speak, knowing that any word he uttered would only deepen his ruin. He had harvested a garden of greed, and now he was the only one left to eat the bitter fruit. But the story doesn't end with a simple refund. When the digital dust settled, the authorities found a hidden file in Valerius's system, a list of names that the virus hadn't touched yet, names of people who were waiting for his signal. The harvest is far from over, and the real consequences are just beginning to take root. Thank you for visiting Karma's Harvest. If this story reminded you that the things we say often find their way back to us, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss part 2, where we reveal the true master behind Valerius's downfall and the secret society that is still listening to every word you say. What is one word you would never want to lose money for saying? Let us know in the comments below. Remember, the seeds you plant today are the bread you eat tomorrow.